Think about the most successful man you know. Not a celebrity, not someone curated for public consumption. Think about the man in your life, or the man you are trying to become, who operates at a level most people around him simply do not understand. Who thinks before he speaks. Who does not need the room's attention to feel secure in himself. Now think about where he does his best thinking. Is anyone else in that room? Probably not. There is a pattern hiding in plain sight across the lives of the most accomplished men in human history. A pattern so obvious, once you see it, that you will wonder how you missed it. And yet it goes against almost everything modern culture tells us about how success is built. We celebrate connection. We worship networking. We are told, your network is your net worth. That collaboration is the engine of innovation. But here is what nobody talks about. Newton discovered gravity alone in a garden, while the rest of the world hid from plague. Darwin spent years in near total isolation before publishing a single word of his theory of evolution. Tesla built his greatest inventions entirely inside his own mind, alone. Always alone. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful emperor Rome ever produced, wrote the words that would outlast his empire, in private journals never meant for other eyes. These men were not lonely in the way we fear loneliness. They were not isolated because the world rejected them, they were alone because they understood something that most people spend their entire lives running from. Solitude is not a symptom of failure. For the men who changed the world, it is a prerequisite for it. What if loneliness is not your enemy? What if it is your most underused, most misunderstood, most powerful weapon? And you have been conditioned your entire life to put it down. In the next 30 minutes, we are going to dismantle everything you think you know about being alone. By the end, you will not just understand why successful men embrace loneliness. You will want to.
We live in the most connected era in human history. Right now, you have the ability to speak to almost anyone on the planet within seconds. You carry in your pocket a device that gives you access to more information than any library ever built. And yet, the United States Surgeon General declared loneliness a public health epidemic. Over 60% of adults report feeling lonely on a regular basis. That number has doubled in the last 2 decades, even as technological connection has become total. We have never been more connected. We have never been more lonely. The reason is worth sitting with. What we have built is not connection. What we have built is noise. Constant, relentless, algorithmically optimized noise, designed to keep us engaged, which is a polite word for distracted, every waking hour of every single day. The average person checks their phone 96 times per day. Before their eyes have fully adjusted to morning light, before they have taken a single conscious breath of intention, they have already given their attention away to notifications, to other people's news, to the endless scroll. We do not start our days anymore. We react to them. And this is not an accident. Every application on your phone has been engineered by some of the most intelligent people alive to make solitude feel uncomfortable, to make silence feel like something has gone wrong. Because if you are comfortable being alone, you stop consuming. And a man who stops consuming starts thinking. And a man who starts thinking becomes very difficult to keep distracted. We have confused 2 completely different things. Reactive loneliness, the painful, involuntary feeling of disconnection, and chosen solitude, the deliberate practice of being alone to think, to build, to become. In making that confusion, we have cut ourselves off from one of the most powerful cognitive states available to the human mind. The data tells a different story than the culture does. Studies consistently show that high performers across industries and time periods spend significantly more time alone than average, not because they lack social skills, but because they have learned that certain kinds of thinking simply cannot happen in a room full of other people. The men who achieve at the highest level are not running from people. They are deliberately running towards solitude, because they know what it produces. And once you see what it produces, you cannot unsee it.
Before we go further, we need to make a distinction that will change how you experience every moment you spend alone for the rest of your life. There are 2 fundamentally different types of aloneness. The difference between them is not just semantic, it is psychological, neurological.
It is the difference between a wound and a weapon. The first type is reactive loneliness. This is the loneliness that hurts. The 2 a.m. feeling of lying in bed, wondering why the people you want in your life are not there. It is involuntary. It happens to you. Brain scans show that social exclusion activates the same pain pathways as physical injury. Reactive loneliness is real, it is painful, and it deserves to be addressed through genuine human connection. But reactive loneliness is not what we are talking about today. The second type is chosen solitude. Chosen solitude is the deliberate act of withdrawing from external noise to turn inward. It is not the absence of connection. It is the creation of conditions in which a different, deeper kind of connection becomes possible. The connection between you and your own mind. Think about the difference this way. A man sitting alone at midnight, scrolling his phone, wishing someone would text him. That is reactive loneliness. A man sitting alone at midnight, working on something that matters to him, choosing that silence over every other option available. That is chosen solitude. Same room, same silence, completely different experience, completely different outcome. The difference is intention. And intention transforms the neurological experience of aloneness entirely. When you choose to be alone, when you enter solitude deliberately and with purpose, your brain does not register it as a threat. It registers it as space, as permission to go deeper. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire of over 60 million people. He was surrounded by senators, generals, and advisors every single day of his reign. One of the most socially embedded men who ever lived, by necessity. And yet he wrote the Meditations entirely for himself. Not for publication, not for an audience, not to be seen or admired. He went inward, alone, and had conversations with himself that shaped the moral philosophy of Western civilization. The question is not, are you alone? The question is, are you alone with intention? Because the moment you bring intention to your solitude, everything changes. The silence stops being something to escape and starts being something to enter. The empty space in your schedule stops being anxiety-producing and starts being the most productive time in your week. This shift, from reactive loneliness to chosen solitude, is the foundation of everything that follows.
Now let us look at the evidence. Not theory, history. Because the most convincing argument for solitude is not a research paper. It is the fact that the men who changed the world, who built things that lasted centuries, who thought thoughts that reshaped civilization, did it alone. Consistently, deliberately, across every field and every era. The first is Isaac Newton. In 1665, the Great Plague swept through England and Cambridge University closed its doors. Newton was 23 years old. He returned to his mother's farmhouse in Woolsthorpe, a small village with nothing, no colleagues, no library, no intellectual community, no one to impress. For 18 months, he worked alone. In that solitude, he invented calculus. He developed the foundational theory of gravity. He made breakthrough discoveries in optics that demonstrated white light contains the full spectrum of color. He laid the groundwork for classical mechanics that would govern physics for 200 years. Newton himself called this period his annus mirabilis, his year of wonders. Historians largely agree, it may be the single most productive period of individual scientific thinking in human history. The world was shut down. Newton used the silence to open everything. The second is Henry David Thoreau. In 1845, Thoreau walked into the woods near Walden Pond and built a small cabin with his own hands. He was not running from failure. He was a Harvard-educated man with friends and options. He chose to leave anyway. He lived alone at Walden for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days. He grew his own food. He wrote, he walked, he thought. What he produced became one of the most influential works in American literature, and his essay on civil disobedience shaped the thinking of Gandhi and Martin Luther King. He wrote that most men live lives of quiet desperation, going to their graves with their songs still in them. He went to Walden to make sure he would not be one of them. The third is Nikola Tesla. Tesla poured everything into solitary work. He slept little, ate alone, and thought constantly. And what he produced was astonishing: alternating current, the induction motor, radio transmission, remote control, the foundations of the modern electrical system that powers nearly everything you use today. Tesla described his process in a way that gives us a direct window into what solitude made possible. He said he could visualize a machine so completely inside his mind, every component, every dimension, every mechanical interaction, that he could run it mentally and identify flaws before building a single prototype. That depth of internal visualization is not built in a conference room. It is built in silence, over years, through the practice of sustained solitary attention. The fourth is Carl Jung. In 1913, Jung ended his professional relationship with Sigmund Freud, costing him his standing, his network, and much of his identity. He could have sought new alliances. Instead, he went inward. For several years, he explored his own unconscious through deliberate, structured solitary introspection. He recorded everything in what became the Red Book, kept private for nearly a century after his death. What emerged from that period of painful solitude was the foundational framework of analytical psychology. Introversion and extroversion. The collective unconscious. Archetypes. The shadow self. Every concept that made Jung one of the most cited psychologists who ever lived was born when he was professionally isolated and radically alone. He did not survive the darkness despite the solitude. He used the solitude to see through the darkness. The fifth is Steve Jobs. Before every major product decision, Jobs took long, solitary walks. Hours alone, thinking through whatever needed to be thought through without the interruption of other minds. Many of Apple's most significant product concepts were refined not in design meetings, but on these walks. His early spiritual pilgrimages to India taught him, in his own words, to trust his intuition, to quiet the voices of convention long enough to hear his own. And his own voice, it turned out, had something to say. Now step back and look at these 5 men together. Different centuries. Different disciplines. Different temperaments. 5 completely different reasons for choosing solitude. 1 completely consistent result. When these men created the conditions for sustained, intentional aloneness, they produced work that outlasted them by centuries. That is not coincidence. That is a pattern. And patterns this consistent across this much history deserve your serious attention.
Now let us talk about what is actually happening inside your brain when you are alone. Because this is not philosophy anymore. This is neuroscience. And the science tells a story that is even more compelling than the history. Your brain has 2 primary modes of operation. The first is the task-positive network. This is the mode your brain enters when you are actively engaged with the external world. Responding to email, having a conversation, scrolling social media, processing incoming information. Your brain is alert, reactive, externally focused. The second mode is what neuroscientists call the default mode network, or the DMN. The default mode network activates when external input falls away, when you are not being asked to respond to anything, when the noise stops, when you are truly alone with no demands on your attention. For a long time, scientists assumed the DMN was essentially idle brain activity, filler between the moments that actually mattered. They were spectacularly wrong. Research over the last 2 decades has revealed that the default mode network is one of the most sophisticated cognitive systems in the human brain. It is responsible for self-reflection, the ability to examine your own thoughts, motivations, and patterns of behavior. For future simulation, mentally projecting yourself forward, running scenarios, planning strategically. For creative synthesis, making unexpected connections between ideas. And for emotional consolidation, integrating experiences and extracting meaning from them. All of this happens in the default mode network. And here is the critical point. The DMN and the task-positive network are largely anti-correlated. When one is active, the other is suppressed. When you are consuming, scrolling, listening, reacting, your default mode network is essentially offline. This is why your best ideas never come while you are staring at a problem trying to force them. They come in the shower, on the drive, on the walk. In every moment when you have accidentally stopped consuming and your brain has finally been given space to do what it does naturally. The problem is that most men in 2025 have so thoroughly eliminated silence from their lives that their default mode network is chronically underactivated. They fill every available moment with input. They have not sat alone with their own thoughts, without a screen, without headphones, for months, some for years. And they wonder why they feel creatively stuck, why they cannot think clearly about the future, why their sense of self feels vague, why they react emotionally instead of responding with intention. This is what chronic sensory overload does to the most sophisticated cognitive system in your brain. It starves it. A landmark study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology tracked individuals who deliberately sought solitude and compared them across multiple measures to those who consistently avoided it. The solitude-seeking group scored significantly higher on creative thinking, emotional regulation, and long-term life satisfaction. And they reported higher quality relationships, not fewer, better ones, because they brought more of themselves to those relationships, having spent time actually discovering who that self was. The research also consistently finds that people who are most comfortable being alone are not less socially connected. They are more thoughtfully connected. There is also a growing body of research on attentional fatigue, the cognitive depletion that comes from sustained external demands. Every notification, every context switch, every piece of incoming information costs a small unit of attentional resource. Accumulate enough of those expenditures and the tank runs dry. Decision quality drops. Emotional regulation weakens. Strategic thinking disappears. The recovery mechanism for attentional fatigue is not entertainment. It is not socializing. It is unstructured solitude. Quiet time with no input demands. The brain needs this the way a muscle needs recovery after exertion. Without it, performance does not plateau. It declines. The question is not whether your brain needs solitude. The neuroscience has answered that clearly. The question is whether you are willing to give it what it needs.
We have the history. We have the neuroscience. We have the philosophy. Now let us talk about what you actually do. Because knowledge without application is just entertainment. And I did not make this video to entertain you. What follows is the Solitude Protocol, a 5-level system designed to build progressively. You do not need to implement all 5 levels immediately. Start with level 1, master it. Then move to the next. One rule applies to all 5 levels without exception: no consumption. No podcasts, no audiobooks, no music with lyrics, no social media. These practices exist exclusively for your own mind to speak. Your only job is to be present enough to hear it. Level 1, the morning mind space. Every morning, before you touch your phone, before you open any application, before you speak to anyone, give yourself 30 minutes of silence. Just presence. Coffee, if you drink it. A window, if you have one. Your own thoughts, unmediated by anyone else's agenda for the first 30 minutes of your day. This sounds simple. It is not. The gravity of the phone at that hour is almost physical. Every social platform on your device has been engineered to capture your attention before you have had time to establish your own intentions for the day. The man who refuses to give that first hour away is doing something radical. He is starting his day on his own terms. Over weeks and months, you will notice that the clarity you bring to the first 30 minutes of your morning is the clarity you carry into every decision that follows. Start here. This is the foundation. Level 2, the solitude walk. 3 to 5 times per week, walk for 45 to 60 minutes. Alone. Without headphones. Without your phone in your hand. Do not try to solve problems. Do not plan. Simply walk and let your mind do what it naturally does when it is not being directed. Process, connect, surface, integrate. Ideas will come. Insights will arrive. Problems that seemed intractable in front of a screen will dissolve unexpectedly in open air. This is your default mode network doing exactly what it was built to do. You are simply creating the conditions for it. The first few walks will feel uncomfortable. The absence of stimulation will feel like withdrawal, because it is. Push through it. That discomfort is the threshold. On the other side of it is something worth finding. Level 3, the weekly unplugged session. Once per week, schedule 3 hours with nothing but a notebook and a pen. No screens. No phone within reach. Write, make lists, draw diagrams, map out decisions you have been avoiding. The notebook is important. Writing by hand is slower than typing, which is a feature, not a bug. It forces more deliberate thinking. And it creates a physical record of your thinking you can return to. 3 hours will feel long the first time you do this. It will eventually feel like not enough. Level 4, the monthly solo day. Once per month, take a full day alone in a different environment than your usual one. A different city, a natural setting, an empty office on a weekend. The change of environment is deliberate. Your habitual surroundings are saturated with habitual associations, the people, the obligations, the routines of your daily identity. Getting out creates psychological distance. You see your life from slightly outside it. Reserve this day for big picture questions only. Where am I actually going? What am I building, and why? What has quietly stopped serving me? These are not questions answered in 20 minutes. They require a full day of honest circling. Most men never ask these questions, not because they do not care about the answers, but because they never create the space in which honest answers can surface. Level 5, the annual retreat. Once a year, take 2 to 4 days of extended solitude. Go somewhere you have never been. Bring almost nothing. The examples are everywhere. Marcus Aurelius retreated to write. Jobs retreated to think. Bill Gates, famously, takes 2-week think weeks twice a year, completely alone, reading, asking questions he cannot answer in the noise of running one of the largest companies in the world. This is where your deepest recalibrations happen. Where the accumulation of a year's worth of experience finally gets the processing time it deserves. Where your sense of direction, blurred by the daily demands of living, gets reset. Start with level 1 tomorrow morning. Put your phone on the other side of the room tonight. Give yourself 30 minutes before you give the day to anyone else. And see who you are when it is just you.
We have covered a lot of ground today. We have looked at the epidemic of loneliness in the most connected era in human history, and asked why, if connection is so abundant, more people than ever feel profoundly alone. We have drawn the distinction between reactive loneliness, which happens to you and diminishes you, and chosen solitude, which you create deliberately and which builds you. We have looked at Newton in his farmhouse, discovering gravity while the world hid from plague. Thoreau in his cabin, refusing to live in quiet desperation when deliberate living was available to him. Tesla, visualizing machines entire in the theater of his own mind. Jung, excavating the unconscious through years of voluntary inner work. Jobs, walking alone through his thoughts before walking his ideas onto a stage that changed the world. We have looked at what your brain actually does in silence, the default mode network that only activates when the input stops, responsible for every creative insight, every genuine self-reflection, every strategic vision you have ever had. And we have looked at a practical 5-level framework through which you can begin to build what the most accomplished men in history practiced, not as an accident of circumstance, but as a deliberate strategy for becoming who they were capable of being. Now I want to leave you with something to carry. The truth that no one posts about. The truth that does not trend. The truth that does not fit on a motivational graphic. The loudest rooms produce the most noise. The quietest men produce the most change. Newton's gravity. Darwin's evolution. Tesla's electricity. Jung's psychology. Jobs' vision. None of these were born in a meeting. None of them came from a man who was always surrounded by people, always reacting, always consuming. They came from men who were willing to be alone, who were willing to sit with discomfort, with uncertainty, with the unsettling silence that arrives when you stop distracting yourself long enough to hear what is actually underneath the noise of your daily life. Successful men do not embrace loneliness because they have no other option. They embrace it because they have learned that certain things can only be found in certain conditions. And those conditions require silence. There is a version of you that only exists in solitude. A version that thinks more clearly, sees more deeply, plans more strategically. That version is not absent. He is not lost. He has not been destroyed by the noise. He is simply waiting for the room to be quiet enough for you to hear him. This week, give him a chance. Walk without headphones tomorrow morning. Drive home in silence tonight. Sit with a notebook for 30 minutes and write down whatever comes, without judging it, without performing it. Just give your own mind 30 minutes that belong only to it, and see what happens. Because in the experience of every man who is seriously committed to this practice, what happens is not nothing. What happens is everything. If this video shifted something for you, save it. Send it to someone who needs the permission to be alone. A brother, a friend, a man you respect who has not stopped long enough to breathe in longer than he can remember. And if you want to keep going deeper, subscribe, because this is only the beginning. The work continues next week. See you there.